Government has welcomed the provisional ruling by the International Court of Justice on the genocide case it brought against Israel. The Independent Electoral Commission of South Africa continues with voter registration abroad. And the former US President Donald Trump says he'll appeal yesterday's court order to pay $83.3 billion in damages. This is to E. Jean Carroll for defamation. A very good afternoon. If you've just joined us, we're coming to you live from our studios here in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. Welcome to Week in Review. Now, this is the program where we review some of the biggest stories to come out of the week. I'm your host, Mfundo Mabalani. Now, government has welcomed the provisional ruling by the International Court of Justice on the genocide case it brought against Israel. The court ordered Israel to enable the delivery of humanitarian aid to Gaza and prevent its forces from carrying out genocide against Palestinians. However, it stopped short of ordering a ceasefire.
The court considers that, with regard to the present situation, Israel must, in accordance with its obligations under the Genocide Convention, in relation to Palestinians in Gaza, take all measures within its power to prevent the commission of all acts within the scope of Article 2 of the Convention.
An interim ruling by the UN's judicial organ imposing provisional measures on Israel that did not include an order on an immediate ceasefire, but made several demands on Israel's actions that were welcomed by South Africa.
The ICJ, as the principal judicial organ of the United Nations, has handed down a ruling that the State of Israel should immediately implement a set of provisional measures to prevent any further acts of genocide in Gaza, and to desist from such acts and to take effective measures to prevent the destruction and ensure the preservation of evidence relating to acts of genocide. As the South African government, we welcome the decision of the International Court of Justice.
The court's provisional measures order Israel and its military to comply with its obligations under the Genocide Convention, including to prevent the killing of Palestinians or causing them serious bodily or mental harm. That Israel take all measures to prevent and punish direct incitement to commit genocide in Gaza. That Israel must take immediate and effective measures to provide urgently needed basic services and humanitarian assistance in Gaza. That it preserves evidence related to acts within the scope of the convention, and that Israel reports back to the court on implementation on the measures within 1 month. The UN Secretary-General noted the decision that did not accede to his call for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire.
The Secretary-General recalls that pursuant to the Charter and to the statute of the court, decisions of the court are binding and trusts that all parties will duly comply with the order from the court. In accordance with the statute of the International Court of Justice, the Secretary-General will promptly transmit the notice of the provisional measures ordered by the court to the Security Council.
Several EU countries, including France, Germany, Spain and Belgium, affirmed their support for the court and international law, urging parties to comply with the court's decision, while the United States called the ruling consistent with its views on the matter to date.
The court's ruling is consistent with many of our positions, and much of the approach that we've taken with Israel. For instance, in the view that Israel has the right to take action against the terrorists on the October 7th attack, that they have an obligation to be mindful of minimizing civilian casualties, that they have an obligation to assist the international community to get humanitarian assistance. South Africa filed a case based on allegations that they believe genocide was being conducted by Israel in Gaza. I don't believe it was directed at us at all. We simply have said consistently, we find that claim is unfounded. And the court also did not find Israel guilty of genocide.
Palestine welcomed the judgment.
They ruled in favor of humanity and international law. We call in all states to ensure that all provisional measures ordered by the court are implemented, including by Israel, the occupying power. This is a binding legal obligation. States now have clear legal obligations to stop Israel's genocidal war on the Palestinian people in Gaza and to make sure that they are not complicit.
Israel's UN envoy responded to the ruling at an annual International Holocaust Remembrance Day event in the General Assembly, which coincided with the court's ruling on Friday.
Today of all days, the day that we commemorate the genocide of the Jewish people and swear here never again, the International Court of Justice made it clear that it won't reject outright the case of a Nazi terror organization that seeks to commit genocide against the Jewish people. It's outrageous. Every year we dedicate this day to discuss the surging Jew hatred poisoning the world. And this year, the year in which the largest number of Jews were massacred since the Holocaust, anti-Semitism has risen to heights not seen since the Nuremberg laws. We can only draw one conclusion, a sad conclusion. The UN has failed in its mission.
As the death toll in Gaza now exceeds 26,000, with tens of thousands more injured, hundreds of thousands facing famine, and almost the entire population living in appalling conditions, the world is watching to see if the court's decision will change the character of Israel's offensive against Hamas in the enclave. Sherwin Brycepease, SABC News, New York.
Now, meanwhile, Al Israel Airlines says it will suspend its route to Johannesburg at the end of March. It has cited a steep drop in demand after South Africa accused Israel of genocide. Israel's flag carrier flies up to twice weekly to Johannesburg. Now, the South African Jewish Board of Deputies had met the airline last year, and it says it became apparent that operating a once-a-week flight was economically challenging for them. The lobby group adds that they're proactively exploring various strategies and proposals around the economic feasibility of this route and potentially finding a solution that could see the reinstatement of the Al Al's direct flight in the future. Now, joining us to talk more about this is political economist and senior research fellow at Four Rivers, Lebogang Pheko. Mr. Pheko, good afternoon, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much.
No, it's a pleasure to have you with us. You know, for many, they were of the view that the ICJ order would give some sort of clarity or settle this one aspect of the current bombardments that have deprived hospitals of much-needed aid, among others. But here we are. Post that order, the internet is absolutely littered with varied interpretations of that order. Pro-Israelis are saying the ICJ merely reminded Israel of its obligation, but pro-Palestinians are saying even though there was no order for a cessation, but by implication, Israel has no choice but to cease fire. What are your views on what we're seeing post that order?
Thank you for the question. I think that this is a Pyrrhic victory in terms of that it is a win that isn't per se victorious in tangible terms. What the ICJ, I suspect, have tried to do is to perform some form of legal diplomacy. In so doing, they have avoided presenting a polarizing ruling. So if they had, for example, said ceasefire in explicit terms, it might have resulted in some of the judges there choosing to diffuse a lot of these sorts of a lot of the rulings. So what they have instead opted to do is to rephrase and to reframe them in ways that are actually de juris, resulting in a ceasefire, even though de facto they don't state it explicitly. Well,
but are we sure that is what will be the result?
The legal authority for them to take the lowest hanging fruit and to go for the middle ground and the path of least resistance. What this also does is that it increases the evidential burden against Israel. So when you have, for example, 16 judges, 15 judges in favor of and 2 judges against, or 16 judges in favor of and 1 judge against, the eccentric of the judge from Uganda, for example, what this also illustrates is that they're trying to leverage moral authority and moral, numerical nation-state influence around this judgment. Whereas if they had taken perhaps a much more definitive approach, one can argue the merits and demerits of any of these approaches, by the way, but one perspective is that if they'd taken a definitive approach of calling, of praising a ceasefire as a ceasefire, that would then possibly have been much more polarizing, and we might have had judgments of 7-5, for example, or split down the middle, which would then have given Israel, and particularly Benjamin Netanyahu, the leverage to then say that even the ICJ is divided, that even they have not outrightly denounced what we are doing, and in fact, they may even have phrased this in their own perverse way as a victory. So I view this as legal diplomacy in many senses.
But this very legal diplomacy or balancing act that we saw, will it in fact yield the desired results now here? Because what we're seeing from many, it seems as though it will be business as usual, beyond just the report in 30 days, but really Israel is of the view that they were just being reminded of their obligations. And as far as they're concerned, they've stated on various platforms that they have taken all measures to protect civilians as they hunt out Hamas.
But I think, this is patently untrue. So whilst, in fact, so there are 2 different ways that we can view this. We can view this as the potential for we can view this as, for example, the potential for huge interpretations and gaps in interpretation. Now, what this means is that we could see this in the one scenario is that it's business as usual for Israeli aggression, for Israeli hostilities, and for the war of Israel against the people of Palestine. The other way that we could view this is that then it also buys the international community and the legal community the time, the space, and the languaging to be able to provide much clearer sanctions. So remember that we also are playing a long-term game. This is linked as well to the fact that there are other judgments that are yet to be heard in the coming weeks at the ICJ. The one is the case around the access of humanitarian aid in war situations. Remember also that Turkey is bringing a case against Israel in coming weeks, and Indonesia are also bringing a case against Indonesia in coming weeks. So it's possible that the ICJ judges are also playing a long-term game and using these different cases and different jurisprudential moments to build a coherent and compelling case that begins and continues to swing the tide of moral influence, of political influence against Israel. And I think that we've seen it in pockets over the past few months. And certainly the momentum has come to a crescendo with this case against South Africa, that South Africa has brought, I should rather say. And I think that we should also be modest in our expectations. So for somebody like me who had very modest expectations, and I suppose most of us would agree that we were not expecting a free and liberated Palestine to be announced yesterday, right? We were probably not expecting a 2-state system solution to be announced yesterday. We were probably expecting the illegitimate state of Israel to vacate the large amounts of land that they have illegally encroached, of Palestinian lands that they have illegally occupied, not only since 1948, but incrementally over the last few decades as well. I'm sure that we were not expecting and we probably were not even expecting for a complete and immediate cessation of arms, because unfortunately, and I'll tell you why we weren't expecting this, because Israel is historically bombastic, arrogant, and unwilling to listen to international rulings. They seem to feel that among the international polity, they in the United States are the exceptional special children. In 2005.
Ms. Peku, just to interject there, when you speak about what many didn't expect, I also saw that just post the arguments, there were many who didn't even expect the jurisdiction element to be met. And I want us to take a step back and discuss that jurisdiction element before this order was made, because many were worried. Just as soon as we saw Israel's legal counsel take the stand. It seemed as though he had convinced some that his argument of a dispute not existing was possibly legitimate. That when they brought that matter, after South Africa had argued and then we had Israel's legal counsel, many were now not certain if the jurisdiction element would be met, but we heard that the public statements at the UN by South Africa's representative, as well as that note verbal expressly stating South Africa's position on the offensive by Israel, was sufficient, and therefore a dispute did exist. What did you make of just that jurisdiction element that was then settled?
I think that was excellent, because what it did is that it also removed Israel's locus standi, and they've been standing on the premise that there is no genocide. They've been standing on the premise that South Africa as a nation state is not entitled to bring an action against them, and they've also been standing on the locus standi that their stake and their rights of territorial sovereignty in Israel, in the Palestinian region, cannot be contradicted and cannot be opposed. So what that jurisdictional ruling does, it gives South Africa and any other state the locus standi to be able to bring a case against Israel. Secondly, it calls into question the logic of their occupation. And thirdly, of course, in the most immediate sense, it then also calls into question the sense in which they have seemingly behaved without reproach, as though they are without reproach, and as though their rights are the only rights, as though they are the only nation who have the right to defend themselves. So what this does is that it then illustrates that their logic has been flawed and has been a fallacy from the outset.
Ms. Peku, I just want to pick your brain on another matter that we've seen. It's something that isn't new. Ever so often when there is a judgment or an order, many tend to want to elevate the minority judgment or the dissenting judgment just to perhaps further their cause or sort of strengthen their argument. We're seeing it here with this particular matter, because many now are floating around the minority judgments or dissenting judgments and elevating these positions when we actually do have an order, the official judgment on this matter. What are your views on just that trend?
Look, I mean, that is the way of the world. I mean, I also think that we always want to see ourselves, hear ourselves, and be validated in the things that we hear, whether they're minority views or not. And the thing is, minority views are there because of the robustness of the law. They exist to show that the law and the legal findings that we come to are not always the result of consensus. They're a result of compromise. And sometimes what they also do is they give, for the record, judges the opportunity to reframe their own position so that in later years, perhaps other legal scholars and people who are interested in these matters might begin to draw from that, but they can never be taken as binding, because majoritarianism is how we carry legal judgments, and not minority.
So these are academic. So these are just academic.
They are academic, and later on, what they can do, though, is they can be influential if they're framed well enough, but they can never be used as precedent. The precedent is the one that has been set now by the majority ruling.
Ms. Peku, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. That's political economist and senior research fellow at Four Rivers, Lebogang Peku. More news on the other side of this break. Do stay with us. Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. Now, this week, lead investigator in the Senzo Meyiwa murder case, that's Brigadier Bongani Gininda, has read a statement in which one of the accused, Moses Bia, implicates singer Kelly Khumalo as being the person who ordered the killing of Senzo Meyiwa. Now, Khumalo was Meyiwa's girlfriend at the time. Gininda read a statement as requested by Defense Counsel Thulani Mngomezulu, who represents accused 1 and 2 in the matter. Sibia revealed that Khumalo paid and ordered the hit. To review this week's proceedings with us is Advocate Romeo Ntabeleni, Senior Legal Analyst and member of Legal Practice Council of South Africa. Advocate Romeo, good afternoon and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, good afternoon and thanks for having me.
No, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Now, that particular affidavit that was deposed by lead investigator Bongani Gininda on Wednesday mentioned, as I state in that intro, that accused too told police that Kelly was the mastermind behind the shooting. I mean, this type of a statement you saw garnered a lot of attention, with some people even going as far as asking why Kelly Khumalo wasn't indicted. Just talk to us about the implications of those revelations in the trial within a trial, because they're still arguing admissibility of those very confessions.
Yeah, I think you've already given an answer in your statement. It's not for the first time we are hearing that Kelly Khumalo is a person of interest in this matter, and she has been mentioned several times before the trial, within a trial, as you have actually mentioned. And the question that we really need to talk to as lawyers and what we are concerned about is the admissibility of the statements that have been made. And as you have correctly said, that the statement that has been made, the admissibility of those statements are questioned. And then that is number one. If we pass there, in relation to the admissibility, and the court says the statement were made, voluntary and without force and in compliance with the requirements of the Criminal Procedure Act, that is the first box that we need to tick. The second one is that, can this statement be used against Kelly Khumalo as being mentioned? And then the short answer to that question is that Section 219 capital A of the Criminal Procedure Act says no, it cannot be used against her.
All right. Can you just elaborate a bit further on that?
Yes, because the provisions of Section 219 determines that no confession that is made by any other person shall be admissible as evidence for another person. So this is also applicable in this matter, that the statement that has been made by another person implicating another person will not be used in a trial as evidence against that particular person. What we are simply saying is that if the case has a case against Kelly Khumalo, they must arrest her, indict her, as you have correctly said, and they must bring evidence. They can even bring the totality of evidence that they have, which links her to the crime, but not this statement that has been made by this accused person. And even further, this statement that we are talking about, even if it implicates other accused that are accused with this accused person, it cannot be used against them. In the trial.
So does this perhaps, apologies for interjecting there, does this perhaps then clarify the other question as to why the DPP failed to indict her in this matter and only had charges for the 5? Because many were still asking, because Gininda stated that on his part, he brought everything before the prosecutor, including the confessions, but it was then up to the prosecutor to decide whether she should be indicted. Is this possibly the reason, as you speak of now, that those very confessions cannot be used?
Absolutely. Those would be the reasons, because when you look at the confessions, you check as a prosecutor, what do I have against this person? Will this evidence bring a prima facie case against this person that's being mentioned in the statements? And if you find that you are going to be lacking in your evidence, you are not going to indict that person to link this person with the indirect evidence. And then what you need is direct evidence, where when you have direct evidence, you can say that now I have a prima facie case against this person. So everything that we have had now is circumstantial evidence that links Kelly Khumalo to the crime. But we have not found direct evidence that links her to this particular crime that she's being mentioned. So that is why perhaps they thought it wise that let's rather deal with this accused that we have and leave her aside.
Advocate Romeo, there was another debate in certain quarters around the divulging of just the contents of the confessions themselves at this point, that if one is still arguing admissibility, does it not defeat the purpose if you're already going to divulge what is there, because it does tarnish one's name, or the information is now out there and will forever be debated? What is the exact process? Can you divulge confessions when you're still arguing as to whether they can be admitted into the court record?
It depends. The court makes a ruling. If ever these confessions are not supposed to be divulged, the court will make sure that they hold this evidence in camera. And you see that in this matter that we're dealing with, this is a matter of public interest, and the court has allowed, they've made a ruling that the proceedings must be aired. So if ever there was an application which was made that this part of confession is not supposed to be aired, an application was supposed to be brought so that at least this kind of evidence will be held in camera. And there was never such an application that was brought and now the ship has sailed, as you've already said.
And then to the time it's taking to finalize this case, we're still within that trial, within a trial. We saw there were arguments for the admission of videos, and the videos were indeed played. I mean, with so many elements that we're seeing now, do you foresee a speedy conclusion of this trial, similar to what we saw with the Oscar Pistorius trial? Because it seems to be going on, and various elements are being brought ever so often.
Yeah, it will not be the same with the Oscar Pistorius trial. And you can see that the trial has been dragging for quite a while now. And then now at least it has commenced. And I've got faith that now that the proceedings are rolling, we might get to an end where the trial will be finished, because at least now the trial is proceeding. But it's not going to be the same with the Oscar Pistorius trial, because that was a clear-cut matter where the accused was appearing before court and they knew the type of an accused that they were dealing with. So now the burden on the state to actually prove this case, calling the witnesses and on and on and on, will take a bit longer, so that at least they can be able to persuade the judge that they've got the right people that are on the dock. And you don't forget that there was also that other issue with the other docket that was mentioned. And the state is really proving hard to persuade the court to make sure that when they finalize the matter, the court can be able to make a determination whether the right accused persons were brought before court.
Advocate, thank you very much for your insights this afternoon. That's Advocate Romeo Ntabeleni speaking to us. More news on the other side. Stay with us. Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. Now, the South African Petroleum Retailers Association has warned that the use of contaminated diesel will cost the economy and harm the reputation of the petroleum industry. This after an Energy Department investigation found that 70 filling stations across the country were selling contaminated diesel, which they mixed with illuminating paraffin. The association's national vice chairperson of the South African Retailers Association, Lebo Ramahloana, joins us this afternoon. Lebo, good afternoon, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Mfundo. Good afternoon, and good afternoon to your viewers.
It's a pleasure to have you with us. Now, this shocking revelation of fuel stations selling adulterated diesel has left many worried, especially about the damage that this compromised diesel could have on their cars. Firstly, your take on this whole matter.
First and foremost, Mfundo, as the South African Petroleum Retailers Association, we would like to commend the DMRE for the job that they've been doing. Over the past couple of months, over the past couple of years, we've actually been part of a compliance forum led by the DMRE. And these are the type of issues that get raised in the compliance forum with all the stakeholders. And everybody, comes around the table to discuss the issues that are impacting our industry. And for the department to be making this breakthrough means quite a lot to the industry as a whole, because it is a rather unfortunate practice that has been taking place in the industry for a while, and hopefully the DMRE is on the right track to actually get into the bottom of it.
Some share your sentiments. They've commended the decision to reveal such, but the department, though, has elected to withhold the names of the fuel stations that were found to have been selling this type of diesel. They merely just issued non-compliance letters to them. Do consumers not have a right, though, to know which operators acted in bad faith? Due to the POPIA Act and the regulation that actually guards this type of information of filling stations that are not compliant, the department has to withhold the names until the investigations are fully done. So that is part of the process, and the Act also kind of deals with the way infringements have to be dealt with accordingly. So you're saying at this point, when they decided to reveal that indeed they found that there were those particular stations that were selling this compromised diesel, they cannot at this point reveal the identity because of the last element of this legal investigation?
Exactly. And also to reassure motorists regarding the notices that infringing sites, compliant or non-compliant sites get given by the DMRE, it's very unlikely that a non-compliant site will continue doing that practice after they've been
It's unlikely, but possibly possible. Apologies for interjecting. It's unlikely, yes, but what if it happens? Would consumers not want the very information to say, don't return to that particular filling station?
The problem is like I said, it's the governing regulation that protects information, personal information, and information that's got to do with tax evasion, etc. So the investigation process becomes very sensitive, and it wouldn't be wise for the department either to also reveal that information.
Mm-hmm. So meaning at this point, consumers just remain worried and will continue to go to filling stations because some of them now, rightfully so, are worried about the damage to their cars. And if they go and want to claim for the damages anyway, they would want a lot of details, including perhaps the regular station that you fill up your car at. How does that work then for the consumers?
That's correct. And, as retailers, and especially with how we deal with our things at the South African Petroleum Retailers Association, is we have a way, if any motorist has got, or suspects that one of the filling stations that they fill up at regularly has got, is contaminating, has contaminated diesel, then they're able to report that filling station. And we are able to also, together with the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, assist with actually getting to the bottom of the problem. So, the worry of motorists is completely understandable, but I can guarantee you, as a retailer for many years, if you get a warning from the department continues to watch you, so it's not merely a situation where you just get given a notice and then that's that. As a retailer that gets this type of notice given to you, you are given you have to remediate. You are given time to remediate your problem. So it's definitely not the case at the moment, I believe.
Mm-hmm. We understand, though, that the sanction that could be imposed is that of a payment of 1 million or 12 months imprisonment for those petrol station operators. Is this satisfactory punishment? Because you're in the space and you're saying that you're equally concerned that your colleagues in the industry, some of them continue with these bad practices. So would this be a sufficient deterrent? Because one assumes R1 million might be in the bank accounts of those who own filling stations. The fine can range anything between $1 million to 10 million to prison time. So and hence the whole process needs to go through its the Department of Mineral Resources legal process, and then a determination can then be made based on the findings of the DMRE. All right, Lebu, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. That was Lebu Ramahloane, National Vice Chairperson of the South African Petroleum Retailers Association. To this story now, the South African Reserve Bank has kept the repo rate unchanged at 8.25% and has affirmed that it will wait for inflation to slow down even further before it slashes interest rates. In his first monetary policy committee for the year, Reserve Bank Governor Lesija Kganyago revised gross domestic product growth down slightly to 0.6%. This is from the November figure of 0.8%. He warned that the long-term economic outlook is uncertain. This as geopolitical tensions and climate change threaten supply chains, output as well as prices.
Households and consumers were looking to the Reserve Bank Governor Lesija Kganyago for an indication of when interest rates will be cut. In his speech on Thursday afternoon, he made it clear that rates would not be cut until inflation cools down to the 4.5% midpoint target. On Wednesday, Statistics South Africa showed that annual consumer price inflation eased for a second consecutive month to 5.1% in December from 5.5% in November.
There isn't a discernible trend that shows that inflation is declining towards our target. And so, for as long as there isn't any sustained decline of inflation towards our target, and more importantly, that inflation stays there in a sustained manner, don't expect us to recalibrate policy.
Kganyago also warned that financing conditions are expected to remain tight, not only in South Africa but across the world. Economist at PwC Khanti Bai agrees and says the banks are already seeing an increase in non-performing loans.
People have used what they had, and now to try and finance that debt. People are borrowing to pay the other loan. So those are the kinds of conditions that are being faced. But certainly businesses are under a lot of strain. And that is something that, is something of real concern. But I think it's reflected in this growth number that he reflects today of 0.6%, that we can't see that given all these conditions that are being faced by whether you are a farmer or whether you are a technology firm, in order for you to continue to invest, in order for you to sustain yourself, you're going to have to go to this market that actually is finding itself in a very, very tight spot. So it's a very sad and difficult space that we're in.
On a slightly positive note, Chief Economist at Nedbank, Nikki Weimar, says although the economy is limping, there's no expectation of a sharp rise in unemployment.
We are seeing pockets of industries where there are retrenchment announcements in mining, manufacturing, but in most industries, I think the good news is that given that they're operating with fairly low staff levels, we're not going to see necessarily massive waves of retrenchments, but clearly with the economy limping along, it is a bit of a worry and it remains a threat. But at this point, a sharp rise in unemployment is not in our base case.
The central bank expects improved GDP from the last quarter of 2023, with output expanding by 0.4%. At the same time, it warns that operations of ports and rails has become a serious constraint, and together with electricity shortages, it says these constraints are expected to persist, severely limiting potential growth of the economy. Diabo Seito, SABC News, Johannesburg.
On the MPC. Now, in the coming weeks, South Africa will resume trading with Saudi Arabia on the imports of South African beef and lamb products. This week, the country hosted the Saudi Arabia business delegation aimed at strengthening current trade relations and also to explore opportunities for both nations using the South Africa-Saudi Business Council. The Saudi Food and Drug Administration lifted a 20-year ban on South African meat imports late last year.
The Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development says plans are now afoot to start exporting lamb and beef products to Saudi Arabia after companies' compliance regulations were ironed out. The ban was triggered by the outbreak of foot and mouth disease in South Africa.
The Saudi Arabian market is a very sensitive market. It requires abattoirs and that should be halal certified. So of the facilities in the country, only those that are halal certified could be audited. And like we said, we are happy that of the 15 that we submitted, 7 are already approved, and we're still working on the other 8 to ensure that information that was lacking, a few corrections that had to be made, will be made, and thereafter we hope to have, before the end of this year, we hope to have all the 15 facilities that were audited. We hope to have them approved for export of goat, cattle, sheep, and their products to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
The South Africa-Saudi Business Council says Saudi Arabia has a 37.6 billion rand meat market, and that the lifting of the ban and the resumption of trade after 20 years will serve to forge stronger trade and investment ties and help the agricultural sector to go beyond the 2.75% contribution to the economy.
This is an exceedingly important bilateral relation between our two countries. There's a great intention here that relationship is underpinned and underscored through economic collaboration and bilateral trade and investment anchoring the relationship. I think what is pleasing in particular is that these are new markets that one will begin to access in time. Saudi is a very interesting market. It's the largest economy, an economy fast approaching $1 trillion. So it's the largest in the Middle East.
There's also an expectation that the development will also lead to increased inputs in the sector and to the creation of jobs.
Even a small growth within the agricultural sector, it is an important one, because remember, there are other companies that, the South Arabians, for instance, they want to, sort of invest in some of the other things that South Africa does. So it is generally going to be a positive one in terms of the sector seeing even if a minor growth, because that growth, that means then even the supporting sectors are definitely going to benefit for that. And of course, the jobs that South Africa requires a lot are going to be created within the agricultural sector itself and those sectors that are supporting it.
Saudi Arabia is amongst 5 countries that joined the Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa BRICS bloc on the 1st of January 2024, with government hopeful for stronger trade in other sectors as part of the efforts to grow the economies of both countries. Katlego Logodi, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Welcome back. Now, the community at large school Queenswood in Pretoria is still reeling after the drowning of a 12-year-old girl, Latoya Templeton. The grade 7 pupil drowned at a leadership camp last week Saturday. Her family is still waiting for the full details of the incident to become apparent as police investigations are underway. Now, Latoya's sister Palisa Templeton spoke to SABC News.
We still don't know what happened. We expect the people who were there, the teachers, to explain to us what happened, but no one is saying anything. There hasn't been any form of communication. The last communication we got from the school about the incident was on Saturday, the 20th, the same day it happened. So we asked the head of department and she said, I don't know. That's the only form of communication I would say we got. The children are saying that the teachers allowed them to go to the pool, and Latoya and her one friend are the ones who went and opened the gate. The next thing they saw was Latoya flapping, fighting for her life in the water. But because she was very bubbly and she liked to joke, she was very playful, they thought it was a joke. Another thing that they said is that they tried looking for her everywhere. The water wasn't really clear, so they couldn't see her. I'm guessing she was now at the bottom of the pool. There's no form of communication from the school. There's nothing. In my understanding, I feel like they should have spoke to us first before the statement. They should have told us that we are going to be launching a private investigation or whatever, then the statement will follow. I feel like the department is just saying these things just for the noise to die down. They just want us to move on.
Meanwhile, the Gauteng department says it's still to rope in an independent investigative body to look into how the grade 7 female pupil drowned.
Our challenge, what happened on the day. That's why we felt that an independent body must be appointed. We are finalizing that process. We have not appointed as yet. Until such time that is done, we will then, introduce that the firm to the school community and the family. There is a report of some sort, but because we then want to satisfy all, from all sides, we then felt that let's have the independent body that is going to investigate. So unfortunately, we'll not much into, the circumstances, but what we know is that, yes, there's a confirmation that the learner drowned, and to a certain extent, the learner succumbed. On all other activities that happen parallel to that, we will leave it to the body that is going to investigate. They will then guide us on what is it that they find, because they will interact with the school management, educators that are implicated, learners that were there. They will also interact with the family. The family will also then give them what you just put on the table now, so that then they will give us the recommendations on how we're going to be moving forward.
The Independent Electoral Commission says at least 18,000 South Africans living in 101 countries have started registering to vote using the newly launched online registration portal. SABC News correspondent Isaac Lukando has more from Tanzania, where voter registration for South Africans is taking place.
I'm standing outside the South African High Commission in Dar es Salaam, downtown Dar es Salaam. Not much happening in terms of walk-ins that the officials here at the High Commission had expected in these 2 days. Of course, voter registration online began yesterday, on Friday. It's expected to continue today and tomorrow. But since on Saturday and Sunday is the official weekend in Tanzania, they expected maybe there could be some walk-ins. But we've been here since early in the morning. Voter registration began at 8 in the morning and is expected to continue until 5. But there haven't been any walk-ins. What officials are telling us is that there is a way to scan. As you can see on my left, there is a poster with a QR code which you can scan and get access to the voter registration portal where you can put in your details. And most people are actually doing this from home. And also another reason why you don't have as many people showing up, in fact there haven't been any people showing up today, is because there has been a bit of a response since yesterday. The Electoral Commission in South Africa tells us that 40 people were able to register from Tanzania yesterday. But we also told by officials here in Tanzania that a lot of South Africans live in the northern city of Arusha. So the likelihood of seeing walk-ins is probably very minimal at this point. This is what the officials here are telling us. They told us that they have some social media handles where they engage with South Africans living in Tanzania, and they have there are not many that are actually on those social media handles. And given the numbers that responded yesterday, it seems like a lot of them are taking advantage of the online registration. And of course, this must be taken in context because Tanzania doesn't seem to have a lot of South Africans living here, although their impact is quite big, as compared to, say, Zambia, where yesterday there was a report of about 96 individuals that registered, and places like Kenya where 73 people registered. And most of the people are taking advantage of this online facility, which is making things easier as opposed to coming here physically. It seems like officials here are on top of things. We've grilled them with a lot of questions over the last half hour, and it seems like they haven't received any complaints thus far about the ease of getting into the portal and of registering. They haven't received any complaints so far, but rightly so. There have been complaints in the past, but it seems like things are going smoothly. The expectation is that once the exercise closes, we'll be able to know how many people actually registered here in Tanzania.
Let's take you further afield now, where former U.S. President Donald Trump has been ordered to pay over $80 million in damages after a defamation trial. He says he'll be appealing that ruling.
A federal jury on Friday ordered Donald Trump to pay $83.3 million in damages to E. Jean Carroll for defaming her, a payout that far exceeded the amount Carroll was seeking. The former magazine columnist accused Trump of destroying her reputation as a trustworthy journalist by denying he raped her nearly 3 decades ago. The former president claimed that he had never heard of Carroll and that she made up her story to boost sales of her memoir. The frontrunner for the 2024 Republican presidential nomination repeated some of those claims on social media earlier on Friday.
I don't even know who this woman is. I have no idea who she is, where she came from. This is another scam. It's a political witch hunt. And somehow we're going to have to fight this stuff.
Another jury last May ordered Trump to pay Carroll $5 million over a similar October 2022 denial, finding that he had defamed and sexually abused Carroll. Trump is appealing that decision and said in a Truth Social post soon after Friday's verdict that he will be appealing the latest jury ruling as well. In the more recent trial, Carroll had sought at least $10 million, saying Trump had shattered her reputation as a respected journalist who told the truth. The jury took less than 3 hours to reach the verdict.
And that's my lot for today. We're back tomorrow. Enjoy your afternoon further. Goodbye.